Hello? Anyone down in chat, go ahead and drop a hello if you can hear me. I'm trying to check if my audio is still working. Well, the problems of live shows and new computers, everybody. Hey there. Hey, Dice Told Tales. Hey, can you hear me? Okay, great. I don't have a little gain mic on my, so I apologize. If the sound cuts out or does anything funky, please go ahead and let me know. I apologize for that. Anyway, thank you for joining me today. Sorry about that glitch. My name is Scott. This is Optional Rule. This is my weekly D&D discussion game. All things D&D, talking about game prep, talking about, I'm going to open my window and get it a little cooler in here. Game prep, talking about how to run D&D at the table, and in an obviously immature and unprofessional way. So thank you very much for joining me today. I'm going to be talking about a little meandering topics today, some friendships and what friends do I have that play D&D and what have the history have been there. I'm going to talk a little bit about paid DMing. Since I'm talking about friends in gaming, it's going to be hard to avoid the topic of paid DMing and how that fits into the whole scheme of things. I'm going to talk about some magic item creation. I'm going to talk about what's up on the post on the blog. So thank you very much for joining me. I do this show every week at noon Eastern time on Twitch. I also live stream to YouTube, although that's more of an archive. Thank you for joining me. I'm also a blogger. You can see my blog up in the window right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about a post that I made this week that I hope you got something out of, and some future content as well. There are no spoilers today for my Rime and the Frost Maiden campaign, so if one of the players are here, first of all, hello and welcome. You don't usually get to come to one of the streams, but there's no spoilers, so nothing to worry about here. I'm either going to talk about what's happened recently or not at all, a bunch of other things. So yeah, this is going to be a good game, I hope, a good session, a good stream, I hope. So again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Go ahead and give a like, subscribe, follow, all those things that they do on social media. I hope you'll do here. This stream is focused on games at play. What does it take to actually run a game? What are the nitty gritties of games and the relationships that they build and how the whole things flow at the table. So I'm going to actually go by a bunch of random topics today, mostly because I'm over prepared for my current tabletop game. Although I'll talk about a few things that came out of that. I'll show a monster that I created last week. Let me bring up D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond. And some homebrew monsters that I came up with. Where are you? My homebrew creations. As you can see, I like homebrewing quite a bit. I've got quite a bit of here in here. Nope, not type date. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a new magic item and a new monster, the Asgardian Auroch, that I used pretty successfully last session. It was a lot of fun. So first, let's start with the with you. What's going on with you this week? I hope you're doing well. What's new in your D&D world? Go ahead and drop it down in the chat. I hope you'll participate in the discussion today. This is always a discussion format show. I hope you'll participate as well. So what's going on in your D&D world? What are the issues you're facing? I'd love to talk to that. If you have any questions, if you have anything to add, please go ahead and drop it down in the chat. I try to make this a discussion-based show. Talk with people in good faith, and hopefully you'll get something out of it too. So let's start off before we get into friends and things like that. This week's blog post was on states of failure, different types of failure, and why it's important in the realm of D&D. Now, you're not expected to read this. I just have it up on to hit the header so I can look at it myself. But go ahead and check that out at optionalrule.com. It was posted this week. It should be right at the top if you're viewing this a week of the that it was posted. If not, just go ahead and give it a search. You should be able to find it. But the motivation for posting this week is I have seen a tremendous amount of discussion online about failure and a reactionary reply to thoughts of failure, that failure from a subpopulation, that failure should not be possible at all in a game, which I have to be honest, absolutely blows me away. That actually just I'm stunned by that attitude. Now, there's a social contract between DMs and players that most of the things you're going to try, you're probably going to succeed at. Most of the combats you get into, you're probably going to succeed at. So failure isn't usually designed into the game. Not usually. Sometimes some scenarios are designed to fail or go a different way, but failure is not really something you design for, but it should be something that can happen. If it doesn't, I really don't know what you're doing in a game. So I'm always shocked when someone comes back at me with that reply. And I had a few people just say failure shouldn't be an option. I don't play a game to fail. I had one person reply to me that. Well, what did they say exactly? It was, oh, what if that person doesn't feel like failing? And I was stunned. I was stunned. I don't know anybody who feels like failing, first of all, but I was just stunned by that. Not even that they're wrong or right, but just that they should. The problem with claims like that in gaming, and this is important to realize because we're all friends, we're all trying to get a game played. The problem with claims like that is you have a set of rules in D&D are not there to be slavishly adhered to or to tell people how they have to live or not have to live, but it does shape the expectations of the world and what it is that you're doing together, what someone else can expect out of the world, what you can expect out of them in the world. So when someone says that you have to now view the world this way, they're telling you, I get to tell you how you feel. I get to tell you how you interpret this. When we already agreed that there's a system that lets us know how to interpret this and that we're going to live with that. It's just bad sportsmanship. It's bad etiquette. It's self-centered. It's many things. So I'm being more opinionated in my discussion about it than I was in my post about it. But I truly feel like it's bad and it's a toxic attitude rising in games. And it merges with a bunch of other things that are happening in games that are really caution everybody to check themselves on if they start to have these attitudes, or understand that if someone comes at you with this attitude, you don't owe them anything. You don't have to adhere to these attitudes. So the adjacent attitudes are things like DMs are there to basically serve the needs of the players. That's somewhat true. The DM is there to help provide a good time and help facilitate fun. But the DM is a player at the table too. They're there for fun of their own. They're not just a mindless encounter dispenser there for the player's needs, which we'll get to in paid DMing in a little bit, by the way, because that does get a little odd when you start talking about paid DMing. But there's this just strange. I was going to say rise of an attitude, but I don't know if it's a rise or not, to be honest. I think with the mainstreaming of D&D, you have mainstream expectations. So you have lots of middle ground people who maybe treat DMs like they treat their waiters or other people they consider service staff. And that's not cool. That's not cool. I don't want to dress that up. That's not cool. It doesn't work. It's not cool in the reverse either. DMs who sometimes treat the players like they're there for their story or their world, that's not cool either. But anyway, I'm getting way off here because I was talking about failure, and I see this getting introduced because there's this concept of failing forward. That's what the failing to fail paragraph was about. There's this concept of failing forward that has been brought forward, which is really great. It's a good concept, but it's often mistaken. That's the term that brings this idea out of players that failure should not be possible more than any other term. So I think people are misunderstanding that term in a profound way that really is affecting games. So when people come at you, if people come at you with that attitude, understand, listen, I don't owe you an outcome. I don't owe you anything. Neither do you owe me anything. We're here to sort of play a game together. So, but describe what failing forward is instead, it's just shunting to a different path. If some pathway to moving forward, opening a lock, finding a clue, talking to an NPC, defeating something in a room, whatever. If that fails, it should open up avenues, or those avenues should already exist for someone to try something in a different way. It's an invitation. Failing forward is an opportunity to succeed by other means. So in other words, if I can't figure out where someone is hidden in the city, I need to back up and start questioning people and establishing relationships and go on a few days of gathering information, or I need to bribe a guard, or I need to blackmail somebody, or all kinds of things, or find a mage that can cast a spell. There's all kinds of alternate routes. The idea of failing forward is a kind way of saying don't try something once and give up when it doesn't work out. That's surprisingly common in D&D, and all DMs sort of struggle with that. I think as a DM, first of all, if you're a player, don't do that. Just back up and try to think of something else. And here's the thing. If you can't think of something, That's okay. That's okay. Ask your other players at the table first. Do they have any ideas? Give it a second. Get a drink. And if you're really stuck, tell the DM, I'm stuck here. I just don't have an idea. It's okay. DMs often come up with plots and they realize, oh, well, you just didn't think of it. Because you can't, the DMs have perfect knowledge. They think you'll think of things. I was just talking about this in a stream last night with Chef Bayer. They think we come up with this plot. We think that it must be obvious that this is the thing to do. And sometimes players are just like, I got nothing. I got nothing. That makes no sense to me. And they're unable to move forward. So what failing forward is an opportunity to do something different. Ask the DM, come up with your own ideas. Those are the ideal cases, but you can do something significant, more significant. So failing to fail. Let me start just quickly the high points of this so I can get across this failure ideology of mine. So first, I've mentioned this on the stream multiple times, but players should always have the minimal information they need to access or advance the story, access the next thing or advance the story. I've talked about that a million times here. If you create a mystery, don't gate the information behind roles. If they can't move forward without it, give them the minimal information that they need to move forward. Just tell them if they do anything, if they look, they find something, but you can gate value added information behind it. So you might be able to find how a person died in a mystery, or that it was one or two strong proponents. They might be able to find the thing that makes them go look to the next thing, but value add information might be what kind of weaponry did that person have, what clues as to their specific clues as to their identity, things that help the player prepare for the encounter that they're eventually going to face in the future. Those are all great value add information that you can gate behind skills, because if they just know they need to go to a cave to find the next stage, to do the next stage of the adventure, that's one scenario. Maybe that's the minimum information. But if they were able to find other information, like read tracks or look amongst other people, look amongst other animals in the region to see what's there, or question townsfolk, they might find things that lead them to expect, oh, this is something that's a very large creature. This is something that's a very strong creature. This is something that has the ability to fly. This is something that's scaly. It has claws. Well, maybe it's a dragon. And they start getting closer and closer to the value-added information that helps them prepare for that next stage of the adventure to handle it well versus going into it blind. So I think that's, first of all, there is an element of failing that they just need to proceed, that there should be no risk of failure. And if there's no risk of failure or nothing at stake, I would say never have them roll, just have them find it and move forward. Then I express some techniques that are out there. Failure is appropriate consequence. Understanding that failure with appropriate consequences is an important dynamic in tabletop role-playing games. I said that straight. That's a sentence I have here. Absolutely right, because they want to feel like they've earned something. It's an earned success. It's an earned consequence. Even if it's bad, it's a result of their action, and there's some logical tie into the whole thing. And then I get into a few resources on helping you as a DM or a player understand failure a little bit. Matt Colville, of course, he's my spirit guide. He has a great series. One of the videos of his Running the Game series, which is an absolutely fantastic series, has a video called The Many States of Fail that talks about some of this and some other ways to handle failure as well. I made a post a while ago called Progressive Failures and Rising Tension, which is a progressive means. What that does is it manages failure through a set of rising stakes and increasing tension. So if you're trying to sneak into a building, your first failed stealth roll doesn't mean you're found, but it means that some guards now start coming down the hallway and you have a risk of being found. You might need to take an action like specifically hide in a box or cast a spell or take another stealth roll. Another failed roll might make them suspect that they've heard something, but again, you haven't been outed, and they start to come and search the area. So again, you need to do something active. Prepare for combat, so switch your tactics. Do something else to hide, and then maybe the third roll. I usually try threes. Threes are a good breakdown in D&D. Grouping of threes is something players can understand and GMs can manage very easily. So threes are a really good grouping of ways to handle this. So that's how I often like to do it, with progressive failures and rising tensions. And there's a format there that's important to realize. That is, first of all, setting the problem. Give them a concrete there's a guard coming down the hallway. You've been trying to sneak. They haven't seen you yet, but you think they're going to run across your area in a moment. That gives the player a sense of urgency. It gives them the stakes and how the situation has changed. They go, oh my gosh, somebody is here. It's a guard. They could get into a fight and they might find me. So they have an idea of how this progresses. I get into it a little bit in chat with Sly Flourish over this. I call that a skill challenge. That to me is what a skill challenge was always supposed to be. He rails against that term because skill challenges in 4th edition were very rotely defined progressive skill checks. I don't do that. I think those are silly, but this is my answer to the skill system. Then there's an idea called success at a cost, which means that if you fail, I actually don't like this one, I'll say, but it's in the DMG. It also comes really out of the fate system that if you fail your roll, let's say you're jumping across a chasm or something like that, if you fail your roll, you still land on the other side, but you slam against the wall or the ground. You take a d6 hit points, or you barely hold on with your fingers, or something like that. I am not a big fan of that. Failure should be a way to failure creates great stories too, and I don't know, turn failures into successes. That's just telling me you didn't set the DC right, to be honest. That if you say the DC is 15 and they roll a 10 and they still get across, well then the DC was 10. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I have a bit of a bugaboo with that, but it's in there. It's something to consider. Degrees of failure and success are another. That emphasizes spectacular failure or dramatic defeat. I am, again, not a big fan of that system, but it is in the DMG, so look it up. Basically says if you succeed or fail by a certain amount on a roll, you should have greater or more disastrous effects depending on a success or failure. I don't like it because it relies on a single D20 roll to do too many things. And a single D20 roll can be anything. The individual number rolled on a D20 isn't particularly significant. You can say you need to be above or below a certain number, but on a single roll, those percentages don't really come out until you have a series of rolls. So it's not specific, or the specific value of a roll isn't particularly meaningful. So having a system that puts meaning on that value, I just think is a bad way to handle it. That's my own personal opinion. Other people seem to really love it because they come at me in Twitter when I talk about that. And if you like it, God bless you, go with it. It's really fantastic. And then there's the fail forward mechanic, which I just talked about a little bit earlier. So yeah, that was a blog post this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll check the blog out every week. I don't know what I'm going to do next week yet. I usually have a topic in mind. The way this came about was I had a whole other topic in mind. Then I had 3 different conversations on Twitter within 2 days about failure and failing forward and this aspect of people thinking failure shouldn't be able to happen. And I was like, screw it, I'm going to write that. And so I just wrote this blog post. That tends to be often how I do a lot of my blog posts. Not all of them, but some of them. All right, let's talk a little bit about friends and attracting people into games, recruiting from your friends. Let's talk about paid DMing and things like that. So, by the way, if you have any comments on any of this, go ahead and drop them down in the chat. Welcome here. If you don't want me to read your comment or question and your name, say so I won't do that, but I usually typically read out names and so forth if someone says hi or something like that. But, all right, so friends in D&D. I have a tremendous number of friends who still play D&D. The people I started playing D&D with, I don't think they still play D&D, but I still am friends with them. I have some friends from college that they still game a little bit. I'm an older fella, obviously, so a lot of my peers have they either split between playing just a little bit but infrequently because they have careers and family and all that kind of stuff, and it's just waned for them a little bit over the years, or they've given it up entirely. So I have a few long-term friends that have done that. I live in the city of Richmond, Virginia, which is a great place to live, and there is a local D&D crowd here. I've gotten to know a number of people there, and this is going to be from the point of view of a veteran gamer who's older. I have some people that it's hard to get close with people as you get older, but I've met some great people through that club. And getting out in a club like that is a great way to find other D&D players. Reddit is something I've used before, but I don't have many friends locally. Like a lot of older Americans, I'm a little isolated, and I don't have all that many friends. So I usually have to do a heavy recruitment process if I'm going to get somebody out for my games. It's been successful so far, and I'm actually going to talk about that here. I posted this. I call this a pitch deck for games, but it's a way I've used to recruit people in my last campaign that I think this format is super, super useful. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what that is in a second, what you should include if you want to do something like this, and how it's useful. I've referenced the safety, baseline safety and consent part. I'm not going to talk heavily about that today because I did a whole post on it. I've talked about that at length before, but this can be useful for finding friends. And if you have friends, engaging your friends in the game, because once you get to know people, just because you know them doesn't mean that they'll participate in a game. So it's worth framing the game that you're looking to do up front so people kind of know what they're getting involved in, and they can make a choice if this is the game for them, or maybe they can make a suggestion to you about, well, how about this instead, and they can do some sort of horse trading to shape. Everybody wants to feel like their thoughts and opinions influence the group that they're in. They don't have to run things, but they want to feel like they were, first of all, that people want to see them, that people enjoy seeing them. They want to feel that their opinion matters. They want to feel like their actions matter, that they're contributing. They want to feel like the things that they want have some influence on the group. So that negotiation piece early on is super, super useful for shaping the right kind of game. Now, having said that, it's important to note as well, one of the fantasies that we have as DMs, and especially online commenters will talk all the time about, well, ask your players or ask your DM or get feedback, or they talk about feedback as if it's this magic thing that falls out of the sky accurately into your ear and you understand immediately what that means. And that is so far from the truth as to be, it's kind of weird how much we talk about it, but how difficult it is to get. First of all, I'll give you my evidence why feedback is difficult. Feedback is so difficult that is literally $1 billion a year industry in the US, at least, that marketing is basically feedback. User surveys are feedback, getting employee feedback, media feedback, all this stuff is extremely difficult because people don't know what they haven't given things a lot of thought. Sometimes they say things off the cuff. Sometimes they feel something and they say it's something that's not really, they don't realize what it is that they really need. So feedback is amazingly difficult to get. So we need to stop in games of treating feedback like it's magic. Now, that means you should ask. You should ask for sure. You should listen to what they say, but at the same time, listen to what they do. If someone says, I want to role play more, but they never talk at the table, you should first look at things like, well, what kind of opportunities to role play do they want? What kind of voice do they mean when they want? Maybe they want to be an audience for role play. Maybe they don't really realize that the things they're asking for don't match their actions. And that's a fair thing to say as a DM. Say, listen, I hear you say this thing to me, and you say you want this, but I don't see you doing that. Like when I would imagine someone doing that, I would think they would do this or that. And that's a great opportunity because they can react to that. That's not just feedback. They can say, oh, I see what you mean there. No, I was thinking it's this. Or, oh, well, I was waiting for that. Or maybe they thought that someone else was talking and they didn't have the right to talk. Or maybe there's all these maybes. You never know where it comes from. So feedback is incredibly valuable. The process of trying to get feedback is almost more worthwhile than the feedback itself, almost. So first of all, keep that in mind. But this really applies to friends too. Friends are not automatically on board with your idea. Friends are not automatically, just because they're your friend doesn't mean they're going to like your game. So it's important to go through the same steps with friends that you would go through with complete and absolute strangers. So I would recommend that, first of all. So there's an interesting aspect to D&D now, especially as an older fellow looking at my peers and friends. Almost everybody I know has somebody associated with D&D in one form or another. That's super fascinating as a veteran who's been around in D&D for a long, long time. I was on a Zoom call with some friends who are remote. They're friends my wife went to college with, and we were talking, and one of them is got into an acting class, and now she wants to get into D&D. She's in her mid 40s, so which is a great. And I was super great when she might move down here, so I'll run a game for her. We had a number of people that their children are playing D&D, which are great too. A friend of mine, when I ran my D&D, I ran a D&D not starter kit. What's the other one?